Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the Dinah episode. That's the story that's found in Genesis chapter 34 in our continuing study of the book of Genesis. If we look at our chart, and I'm not going to lay the whole thing out here, but notice early in the chart you have the birth of twins and then an interlude where Rebecca is at a foreign palace and there's a pact made with foreigners. Go all the way down to the second from the bottom where we have another interlude. This is where we're at now in our study. And this time it's Dinah, not the wife of Isaac, but the daughter of Jacob. Dinah is going to be in a foreign palace, and again there's going to be a pact suggested with foreigners. So there's a certain pattern throughout the entire story of Jacob. Genesis 33 verse 18, Now Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram and camped before the city. He's coming to this city, it's a Canaanite city, the city of Shechem. He bought the piece of land where he had pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of, our translation says money. That's probably not a real good translation, probably silver. And then he erected there an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. So here Jacob's coming back into the land. He's building an altar. He's giving it a name that signifies God of Israel. But he's camping on the outskirts of this Canaanite city, which he has purchased. So here he is. He's at Shechem. This is in the Promised Land, not at Bethel where he had the vision, but fairly close by. And this is the same place where in John chapter 4 we read that Jacob had dug a well here. The well would continue to be known 1,000 years later, where you'd have a Samaritan woman meet Jesus by this well and ask Jesus, "You're not greater than our father Jacob, are you?" Well, as the story turns out, though, Genesis chapter 31 verse 4, Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. The daughters of the land are Canaanites. Dinah is not a Canaanite. She's an Israelite, but she's going to sort of hang out with some of the Canaanite women. And when Shechem the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, so notice Shechem is not just the name of the city, but also the name of this prince whose father rules the city. When he saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. There's no nice way to say this. This is a rape. Yet he was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. Now, what comes about in this story, the rape has taken place. Dinah is raped by the son of the Canaanite chieftain, and yet he wants to do the right thing, and so he goes and he proposes marriage. He goes to Jacob. He admits what he's done. Well, actually, he doesn't do it in so many words, but he wants to marry the girl, and he proposes an extended policy of intermarriage, where he says, "Look, your sons can take our daughters, and our sons will marry your daughters, and we'll all be one big happy family." And Jacob holds his peace for the time because his sons aren't there. And when his sons show up there, they hear the news. They are very upset. And we read that the sons of Jacob answer with deceit. This is chapter 34, verse 13. And in their deception, what they do, they propose, well, that's well and good. We can take your proposal, and we'll marry your daughters, and you'll marry our daughters. We'll marry, intermarry with you. But you have to be circumcised first, and that's a debilitating situation for an adult. Probably is for a child too. But when babies are circumcised, they're not doing too much walking around anyway. But once you have an adult circumcised, that's really going to lay him low for a couple of days. And while that happens, and this is the plan of the sons of Jacob, we have Simeon and Levi that go through and they slaughter all the inhabitants of the city. Now, when we said the sons of Jacob answer with deceit, that's not the word Jacob. That's not the word heel grabber. It's a different word, but this word that's used to describe that is the same term that Isaac had used of Jacob when he said Jacob, he schemed, he acted deceitfully, he acted treacherously, and he came in and stole the blessing. Well, here's the sons of Jacob also acting treacherously, and they kill all the inhabitants of the city. Now, much later, in Genesis 49, when it comes time for Jacob to give both blessings and pronouncements and prophecies over his sons, he mentions Simeon and Levi, these two brothers that committed this deed. And he says there, Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And so Jacob pronounces what sounds very much like a curse upon his sons for this action. That city, Shechem, would come in later days. By the time we get to the New Testament, it's going to have a different name. It will be called Sychar. And this little town, located between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, sort of sandwiched in between these two mountains, would be the scene of Jesus coming to the well of Jacob, the well that Jacob had dug while he was here, and having a meeting with a Samaritan woman. You remember the story in John chapter 4? In John chapter 4, we had the Samaritan woman. Back in Genesis 34, Dinah encountered the prince of Shechem. Here in John 4, the Samaritan woman from Shechem, or Sychar as it's called in the New Testament, encounters Jesus. Back in Genesis 34, Dinah had been treated as though she were a harlot, and that's actually how her brothers describe the scenario. In John 4, the Samaritan woman who lives like a harlot is treated by Jesus as though she is pure. He speaks to her respectfully. He knows her sin. He points it out, but he doesn't dwell on it. Instead, he treats her with respect. In Genesis 34, Simeon and Levi trick the men of Shechem. In John chapter 4, Jesus gives truth to the people of Shechem / Sychar, as we're calling it in the New Testament. In Genesis 34, Shechem is destroyed. But at the end of John 4, people come and they hear, and Shechem is saved.